welcome back to another episode of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I am your host, Todd Rosales, and we have another awesome episode for you. If you paid attention on Tuesday, I know we had some technical, you know what? This is a recorded episode, so me mentioning the episode on Tuesday isn't going to do anything for you. But if you've watched this show before, you realize that, yes, I do get to talk to all the cool brands out in California. I get to talk to a lot of the recreational or adult use side of this industry. But if you watch, you know that I'm a massive fan of everything else that this industry can do. I often say that when this industry meets maturity, the adult use side is going to be very small. Then we're going to have a wellness component, a medical component, and an industrial component to it. I also used to think that I took that little thing I just showed you and I created it. Apparently, I stole it from Emily Paxia. Emily, thank you for that. But I'm very excited today because we get to talk about the actual medical side of cannabis and somebody who's focusing on using cannabis for specific medical conditions, right? I'm very excited about this conversation. I went back, I watched a lot of his previous interviews, and I just hope that I can hold my own in this conversation because we all know I'm just the podcast host. I've got a little bit of information, but hopefully he's going to educate us here today. I'm very excited. Please welcome my guest, Dr. Oludare. I'm going to butcher your name, man. I'm sorry. Oludare Odumosu. Thank you for joining us, and I am sorry for butchering your name. Evan, if you can, edit that out, but thank you for joining us.
Hey, Todd, it's a pleasure. And you have not done worse than some of the people that I know in calling my name. Most people just call me Dr. Odumosu, and that works. And when you're just worried about this, about saying my whole name, just call me Dr. O. That works as well. So it's a pleasure to be on Elevate Your Grind, and I'm happy to be here. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much. And yes, I didn't want to do it. I said it a few times in my head, and I still messed it up. But we can move on from that. I'm so happy that you're here because I often talk about, and you heard me in the introduction, talking about the different sides of this industry. So I'm a parrot. I say the same thing over and over again, but I believe that when we look at the cannabis industry, and I'm talking more to people outside of our industry than inside the industry, when you see us advocating for this industry, when you see the lobbying for this industry, and when you see organizations like NORML and NCIA and Last Prisoner Project, we're not advocating for us to be able to just smoke joints freely. That's not what we're looking to do. That's a very small part of what this cannabis industry and what this plant is going to do for us. And you focus on one of the areas outside of what I was just talking about, actually working with cannabis for medical purposes. Why do we not see more people rooted in science and healthcare jumping all over this? Is it the stigma? Is it they don't believe it? Why is it take somebody who has to have a personal experience or just an outside the box thought to look into this and say, this is the future, this makes sense?
Thank you for that open question, Todd. I mean, I have said this countless times that cannabis is another natural compound. And with, north of 80% of the drugs in the marketplace today being derived from natural compounds, that sets the stage for how I understand cannabis. It is a natural compound with the longest history of documented safety and efficacy. And with that, cannabis has been medicine. Cannabis did not become medicine because all of a sudden I have a license to grow and process and dispense it. It has always been medicine. But for some of the reasons you've mentioned, Todd, which include the states of the legal state of cannabis and the considerations around the regulatory access to it, capacity, historical prejudice against those that have tried to touch the plant, and a lot of a governmental bias that has perpetuated this stigma that this is a drug that would cause you harm or cause you. I must confess, Todd, that I did not grow up with this understanding that I just shared with you. I was raised like a lot of people to believe that cannabis would numb my mind. And until I had a personal experience in graduate school, not out of an experimentation, but almost to be able to say today that cannabis saved my life. It was not until then that as a scientist, I was compelled to really, really contemplate my own understanding of cannabis and what I had just experienced. And my famous line for that is I had come out to say, somebody help me unlearn what I just unlearned, because cannabis reset my sleep cycle, and I have not taken a conventional pharmaceutical drug for sleep since I started using cannabis about 9 years ago. And so since then, I dedicated my scientific path to continue to learn. And then when the opportunity came to participate in the space, I could not pass on it.
I mean, I like that even more, because it'd be one thing if you were kind of raised from, you know, as a kid, that cannabis was not harmful and that it was acceptable and that it was safe. But the fact that you had a set of beliefs, and at some
Yeah.
point in your life, you were able to look at it differently and
Yeah,
change your views based on information that you had. I mean, that's kind of what science is based off of.
absolutely.
And that blows my mind that we can't get more people to do this. But it makes me happy that you are forward thinking and you're starting to actually take steps to make this possible. And I hope other people follow suit. Now, I know there's so many things that we can get into, and I tend to do this. I'll just run off on all the questions I want to ask. But
I'm all yours. I'm all yours. Just go for it.
well, I take advantage of this because in my head right now, there's me, there's you. Obviously, we're talking over Zoom. So I'm like, okay, what can I ask him that I care about? But then I remember everybody that's watching us on the internet here, and I want to make sure that they know who you are. So let's talk about your background a little bit. So this way people can understand, A, why we have beakers behind you, but B, why I am so excited that someone like you is focusing on this because of your education, your background. I mean, just to give a little highlight, I know you were very instrumental in getting 3 drugs through the FDA process and bringing it to market, traditional pharmaceuticals. So, hey, folks, for those of you who think pharmaceuticals are good, obviously you can trust him because he's been on both sides. So give us a little background there and give us your background, actually.
Yeah, thank you. I can't take all the credit for my background photo. I have to give you some of it because you finally validated it. So I love it. So thank you for that. I cut my teeth in traditional scientific development. I have a molecular medicine or molecular genetics. I have a PhD in biochemistry. I have a master's in public health, epidemiology, and biostatistics, where I go from the traditional understanding that when you make medicine or you create science or you understand science or you probe a scientific platform to get more knowledge, it's always towards like either fixing a problem or explaining a problem. But when you do that within the context of understanding the distribution of health or disease in populations, it really gives you a much, while you have a focused understanding of what it is question you're answering, you have a population concept of how it impacts the world. So that's how the combination of my skill sets kind of play. But then I transitioned into traditional pharmaceutical development, especially in the pain space. Was part of a group that brought to life sort of this concept of the submicron class of pain drugs by really focusing on how do you deliver efficacy and still reduce the side effect profiles, because side effect when it comes to pain meds or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen, meloxicam is very highly correlated with the amount of drug you have to take to get efficacy. So we were able to redesign, reformulate, rebrand, and reapprove brand new drugs for the FDA within those same classes of drugs. And it's really based on understanding of the modified chemistry and the dynamics of how the body interacts with these medicines. When the opportunity presented itself to participate in the Pennsylvania licensing opportunity in 2016, I joined the Ilera group, and we were awarded in 2017 one of the first 5 vertically integrated licenses. And so that made me the founding chief operating officer for Ilera Health Care in Pennsylvania. We went on to be successful, and that venture still stays on, but I transitioned, and now I'm the chief executive officer for Zelira Therapeutics, which is a merger of Ilera Therapeutics which is the formulation division of Ilera Healthcare, and Zelda Therapeutics became Zelira Therapeutics, and then I am the CEO. And Zelira Therapeutics is a quintessential biotech company, just the same way you see your biopharmaceutical companies. That's what we do.
Well, that answers my next two questions: is where the name came from and your history with Ilera. But you know, we can just scratch those off the list. No, obviously I joke there, but that's awesome that there's an actual, you know, biopharmaceutical company that's focusing in the cannabis space. And not only that, you guys have experience delivering medication to people in Pennsylvania already, right? So I imagine that this iteration of the company is the next step in that, right? Is taking the experience that you've had delivering medications, because right now, the way that you're able to deliver it is in approved forms, whether it's a tincture or a cream or this, that, and the other. And I could be wrong, I could be right, but I noticed in one of the articles that you said there are over 100 identified cannabinoids. And I believe that the future of the medical market is going to be isolating and coming up with combinations of those cannabinoids. I say I believe, like I was the one who came up with this idea. Yes, I've read a lot of articles. So because I've read a lot of articles, I observe that the future of medicine is going to be isolating these cannabinoids and figuring out which cocktail, for lack of a better term, is going to be the right delivery for a specific ailment, right? And I also think that one of the things that people, you know, as a cannabis user, before we got to the medical part of this, when people were just kind of self-medicating and figuring out, you would get your stomach felt upset, you'd smoke, feel better. You'd have a headache, you'd smoke, you'd feel better. And there were a lot of, you know, some pain, some discomfort. And, you know, you would talk to someone who used cannabis and you think they were a liar. But when you realize you get to the root of it, it's just like the way Tylenol deals with a cold. It doesn't get rid of the cold, but it makes you feel better about the symptoms. You still have the cold. So a lot of people don't realize the reason that we make cannabis out to be this miracle product that does all these things is because it works with a lot of the symptoms associated with these things. So you may still have the underlying cause, but this is probably the smartest thing I've ever said, by the way. You may still have the underlying cause, but at least it helps you handle those symptoms so you can deal with it properly. You know, can you expand on that, some of the things that you're working on? Because, I mean, if we look, and let me see where I wrote this down, you know, you're focused on autism, pain, different cancers in different forms. And I know some of these are in trial now and some of them are kind of preclinical, but can you expand on some of the things you're working on? Because I'm fascinated by this.
I can. And you know, I started to get carried away listening to you because this could have been a flip because I'm listening to you and you were spot on, my friend. You were spot on. Essentially, you know, I started by saying cannabis is medicine, and you articulated very correctly that this plant is endowed.
I blacked out. I don't know what happened. It just, something flowed through me and it came out of me, but go on. I won't interrupt you again.
The spirit came over you and it was absolutely on point.
Possessed me and my brain went somewhere it's never been before.
It's the Matrix, man. You're spot on. You were spot on. You know, but you're right. I mean, you were correct. And sometimes, you know, at the end of the day, I kind of want to start from the back and make about 3 points that have, you know, about what it is we do and why we do it. At the end of the day, one of the things that we really focus on in life is how do we improve quality of life in a disease state or or when you deliver therapy. Is are you able to improve somebody's quality of life if you can? Somebody has cancer, and chemotherapy, as much as may kill the cancer, it's really the goal is so that we can get this person back to some capacity to live, right? ALS, and the list goes on and on and on. Cannabinoids, or the endocannabinoid system, which is our body's own mechanism of making cannabinoid forms or forms of its own cannabinoids, are implicated in modulating several systems across the body. Unfortunately, this knowledge was not part of our training. When I went to Loma Linda University School of Medicine, where I obtained my PhD, I never heard about the endocannabinoid system. And I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of physicians that I know who come from generations before me. They'd never heard about it. But thank goodness and thanks that we're coming into a space where we are understanding that this system actually modulates, has its imprint on so many other systems across the body that affect common and non-common receptor sites that affect different outcomes. So when you think about that, you think about symptoms modulations, you think about changes to whether it's the anatomy, you think of something as simple as sleep. We heal when we sleep. So somebody with a chronic insomnia and is not able to sleep, think about other systems that are either upregulated, like your stress response systems, right? Your cortisol goes off the roof. And when cortisol is present, some other neurotransmitters and other chemicals are not able to function properly, right? That affects your capacity to heal, affects your metabolic experience, and on and on and on. So simply put, being able, what looks like that miracle, is basically able to redirect or tell the body's endocannabinoid system, you got help. We'll help you. Help is here. And allowing the body to do what it is supposed to do. In and of itself, that itself is help. That itself is therapy. So cannabis and the cannabinoids in concert with whether it's the terpenes or other flavonoids, or even when the body sees and understands and interprets some of these molecules, is just able to do what it's supposed to do. I'll give you an analogy. When people say, oh, I am, I perform better if I do this, or if this is available, or, I like to draw in a dark room. I draw better, or I run better on a cold day. Well, the endocannabinoid system understands all of those different systems in the body and creates that cold day so that this system can run better. That's a very simple analogy for thinking about this overarching control. So we do that. That's one. Two is we function to identify these clusters of symptoms that are implicated in certain disease states, and then create formulations that can address those clusters of symptoms, such as we've done with the Hope range of products that we designed and we commercialized, and we've actually published a clinical, it's sort of pseudo-clinical patient outcomes report about the patient's use, and patients have reported a series of impact on both symptoms and certainly on quality of life. So from what people call anecdote and I call real life empirical data, to clinical validations like we do in the Australia part of our business, we are touching both the traditional understanding of the double-blinded, placebo-controlled, crossover design, multi-site studies, as well as marrying that with real-life empirical data to create what we call a very holistic understanding of cannabinoid-based therapeutic experiences. So that's what I do.
So I thought I was smart when I said what I said, and then I listened to what you said, and I realized I'm not in the same ballpark. But it's amazing to me the things that we can do with this, and the lack of education in our healthcare system of what cannabis really is, and that's all due to the 100-year prohibition that we've had. And there's so many issues along with that, and listen, these issues are, I tried to figure out what do we talk about within our industry, because it's a little bit more advanced versus what the general public knows, right? And just for the general public, the access or the ability to be able to do the type of research that we really need to do to fight the battles, it's kind of like putting the cart before the horse, where we want to be able to do this research. So when we go to Capitol Hill and we do our advocacy and our lobbying, we can say with a piece of paper with results and say, look at this. This is what this is going to do for you. But the fact that it is a Schedule I substance, we can't even get the research to prove them wrong. So it's kind of, your hands are tied. Everything's not a study that they want to recognize, or it's a hypothetical, or it's based on historical information that it's really it's very hard to prove the things that we all discuss, right? I mean, is that
Mhm.
kind of in the same way? Right now, I think we have the University of Mississippi is able to
Yeah,
grow a specific strain. I heard you talk about it, which is why I brought it up. But
yeah.
as I understand, I think either you talked about it or the other gentleman talked about it, that representation or that strain is nowhere near the type of stuff that we're working with today.
Oh yeah. I mean, Todd, you were spot on that too. I mean, look, the strain at Ole Miss, yeah, God help us. That's I'll just leave it at that. It in no way represents the cultivar that is available, the advanced, very advanced cultivar that is available to the cannabis industry today in the United States and in some parts of the world. And you rightly pointed to the fact that people say, "Oh, show me proof," but it's like, but then I can't show you proof because I can't get proof. It's like tying my hands behind my back, and then you say, "Oh, look, you can't fight." No kidding, I can't fight. My hands are tied. You know, so it's one of those. Is one of those things. However, there's some good news. There's arbitrage for which until the state federal dichotomy, until that is resolved. Let's remember still that, my people say, or a much more modern interpretation of what an adage that my people have is that if I'm a hammer, I'm gonna look for nails. That's all I understand. If I need to bang on something, right? So if we are trained to think that this is the only way something goes, then that's all we think about. But I have good news. 30 some odd states, including the District of Columbia, has some form of approved, whether it's medical only or medical and adult use, or some form of adult use laws that allows for cannabis to be used to treat or to be recommended for certain conditions. Some are much more specified and some are not. In Pennsylvania, we have 23 conditions. I start there. So basically, the state has said to me, you can make medicine from cannabinoids that can be used and or recommended without making claims for these conditions. Okay, great. In my head, thanks for checking. So you're saying, Department of Health, that you believe that cannabis is safe, you believe that cannabis is efficacious for these conditions. Okay, thank you. Let me ask you, Todd, of the three boxes the FDA seeks to check on in terms of drug development, when you take your drug packet and you want to take it to the FDA, what are the three things? Safety, is your drug safe? Is it not, so that when people take it, it's not going to kill them? Two, is it efficacious? Is it going to do what you said it's going to do? And three, how much of it should they take to get that therapy? A bunch of states are checking two of those boxes invariably for me. So I am not worried because the state has already checked two of those boxes. Then it's my job now to go and follow the guidelines and make good, well-made, well-documented with integrity medicines, get it approved by the state, and then launch it, then gain learning from the patients, let the market, because again, the noise to signal ratio is very clear. Let's take autism, for example. If you have, let me use a child or a patient with autism, and they're using a medicine, let's say the child is self-injurious. The noise to signal is super clear, Todd, right? I mean, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, you know. So again, that's why I move away from anecdote. I think we are captives of our history, even in characterization of our experience. So it's easy for us to say anecdote. But when you have hundreds and hundreds of patients who belong to a certain disease indication using a medicine and then report back a reduction or an impact on a host of symptoms, including quality of life for the patient and for the family of the patient, do you continue to call that anecdote? So that's one of the ways. That's one of the ways you put together these packets that check the boxes and has integrity, and you present that to the regulators and say, hey, if we understand that this is not a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. By the way, we're doing that in Australia as well for this same drug. But in the meantime, here are some of the things that gets the conversation started. That's part of what we do.
And I'm glad to see that people are starting to really bring attention to this. And I've tried to get more medical folks on this show because there is a huge medical component for it, as we've been discussing, right? It's funny to me that when we actually look at what cannabis, prohibition was caused by, and I've talked about this on the show, and it's funny, I talked about it with Derek Thomas from Veritas Farms, and then Joe Rogan talked about it on his show 2 days later. But the initial prohibition of cannabis was twofold. It was Hearst Media being afraid of losing out to the hemp industry, and it was also the prosecution of minorities, that it was a tool that they use to prosecute minorities. It was both fold. And I don't know if I certainly haven't seen anything else. I haven't looked that hard. I don't think there are any studies from way back when Prohibition started that cannabis was doing anything harmful to people outside of a Reefer Madness campaign. That there, maybe there were some made up things here and there, but there are no actual studies that say, oh, we're going to make it a Schedule 1 substance because of this. It was actually a media campaign that outlawed
it. Anyone who's paying attention can take this back. Let's not even go far back as the 1930s. Let's just hang out in the 1970s. And we have Mr. Richard Milhouse Nixon to thank for the prohibition, because in his opinion, the people that really opposed him were the Black Panthers, or the so-called designation of the anti-Vietnam War protesters. And what did they have in common? Oh my God, they consume this thing called marijuana, so you criminalize it, right? To fight your enemies. That's what Milhouse Nixon did. And since then, we continue to fight the fight to help the lawmakers. And I take this opportunity, if that's okay with you, to say to our advocates, continue the work, continue to educate the legislators, continue to share with them these testimonies. I mean, at the front of impact, we see patient communities, like the patients, the communities, the autism communities, the epilepsy communities. They've been at the forefront. I take this opportunity to shout out to Erica Daniels, who is our partner at Hope Grows for Autism. It is
Love
people
Erica.
like her.
We've had her on.
Yes, I understand. It's people like her who have put themselves, and I know she stands on the shoulders and locks arms with other people like herself across the country, who have stood in the gap to say that, this works for our children, and they fought. I mean, without them, really, people like me really don't have a platform for which we can say, yeah, let's go make medicine from cannabis. So I thank people like her.
Well, the ironic part of it is the people that are so opposed to it and the people that are demonizing it are the ones who have no experience with it, and they won't have an experience with it because of their thoughts. I go all the way back to the beginning of the conversation where you were against it and you had a personal experience, and it was from that experience where you actually opened your mind that it changed your opinion, and people are not willing to do that. The irony in it to me, and again, I got this from you, is that 80% of the drugs out today are derived from a natural compound, right? But because I guess as consumers, we're so blinded to that because we walk into a CVS or a Walgreens and we're not seeing plants and herbs and spices and things like that, where these pharmaceuticals are made from. We're seeing bottles of Advil and Tylenol and NyQuil, and because it comes in a little gel tab, that's okay. Because it comes in pill form, that's okay. Well, first of all, cannabis comes in pill form too, but we can get to that in a second. But all of these pills, I think a lot of them, if I remember my high school education correctly, a lot of them were found in the Amazon rainforest, that they were plants and different things like that. And so what makes the plants from the Amazon rainforest or anywhere else across the world a safe source for medicine, but this cannabis plant that is grown in so many locations, that has such a deep history in human history, in religious history, in all the history of all these different cultures, why is this one demonized when the ones growing around it aren't and are currently being used for pharmaceuticals?
Human, it's called human impact. I mean, we boxed ourselves politically into a very bad box when it comes to cannabis, and we have continued to struggle to get out of that box. As you've heard me say already, cannabis is medicine. Cannabis is a natural compound. As a matter of fact, one with one of the longest documented history of safety and efficacy. I mean, it is the truth. I didn't make it up. It is fact. It is for those that are able to access the understanding or the deconstruction and reconstruction or use in some part of components of this plant, you will understand that it is one of the most blessed plants for which medicine can be derived. It contains so many molecules, whether used in combination or in isolation. And I continue to beg our legislators to please work with the people who have the right understanding to make the necessary changes. There are people dying who should otherwise not be dying. If only, I mean, I understand what it takes to make a drug from give me a compound, whatever it is. I understand that process. I have never touched a group of molecules that have so much power than I have seen in cannabis.
You know, I definitely need to dive more into the science behind this because it's so fascinating to me. You know, I think there are so many different components of it, and I look at it this way, right? We finally admitted, the government's admitted, people are admitting that, you know, we have this massive opiate crisis, right? And
Mm.
opiates are fine, right? You get surgery, you're going to be put on a painkiller. People are okay
Mm-hmm.
with opiates,
Mm-hmm.
anti-inflammatories, and everything else. But for the past 30 plus years, we've been creating this massive group of addicts that people kind of ignored for a little bit, and they put a very big stigma on addiction, like, oh, that person, they're a bad person because they do drugs. And we realize now it has to do with mental health, it has to do with so many different things. My wife
Mm-hmm.
was an addiction counselor down here in Florida, and I can't tell you, I mean, according to HIPAA rules, she told me nothing, but I can't tell you how
Mm-hmm.
many times that she would give me a general story about someone who was Ivy League graduated, successful person, and
Mm.
all of a sudden they had a surgery, and next thing you
Mm.
know, they're a pain pill addict, right? So
Yep.
we've been treating people with opiates for so long, and they're dangerous. Maybe they work, right? They do work, but there is a dangerous side effect of addiction that is worse than the pain that you're going to have originally, because not only are you going to get affected, but everybody in your circle is going to affect it, your loved ones and everything else. Why
Mm-hmm.
not look for, I mean, I'm asking the wrong person because you're on my side here, but why not look for an alternative? Why is the greater medical community not taking a step back and thinking, hey, these opiates are working right now, but they're not the best answer because there is this terrible potential side effect that's a lot bigger than we assumed it's going to be. Is there something better we can use? And nobody's looking at cannabis. I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but
Well, no, you're making a very solid point. So at Zelira, for example, we just announced the data for our dose escalation opioid reduction study out of Australia, where the phase one study showed, and this is done, by the way, under the auspices of the TGA, which is the first world regulatory body like the FDA here in the United States. And this study, we showed that our drug formulation was was effective even at double the dose to impact the reduction of the use of opioids. You may have also seen that we announced a partnership with a group called Levine, where Zelira, we are going to be conducting a clinical trial where we're looking at pain reduction in retired athletes in the AFL. That's the Australian Football League, which is
okay.
the equivalent of the NFL. And it's really at the point of addressing this opioid crisis. For me, it's personal. I've told several stories of people that I know that have been impacted. We shall remain nameless. I'm just, I pick one who, ended up losing all of their livelihood in a span of 2 years, from being a professional, highly decorated, to being homeless and being locked up for opioid use because they stepped out of bed and busted up their shoulder. Things like that. It is sad, and cannabis can help.
Yeah, you hear story after story like that. We've had Ricky Williams on the show talking about, having an ulcer from having to take so many pain meds just to practice. We had Eben Britton on the show who had, I think it was an Adderall addiction, just to help him out. And both of them are big cannabis advocates now. And it's funny, you talk about Australian football. If it's the one that I'm thinking of, those guys are some pretty tough guys down there.
Yeah.
For sure. Kind of forward thinking now, I can sit and I can talk about what's wrong with everything else. At the beginning of this pandemic, and for the first time ever, I'm going to kind of pat myself on the back. When cannabis was deemed essential, I kind of had this theory that, okay, we've been deemed essential. The world is looking at us now. What is this industry going to do? Are they going to play by the rules put in place? Are they going to put their best foot forward? And is this a chance now for the spotlight to be on the cannabis industry and put it more in mainstream? And I think, and I'm very proud of our industry, I think we've done that. I think most of the dispensaries around the country, most of the cannabis companies around the country put in great social distancing policies. They figured out delivery rules, curbside pickup things. Sales have increased because, and I know you touch on this, the effects of the pandemic on people. And fast forward to now, there's a potential vote on the MORE Act coming up, right? And, I wish I can say I was more educated on what this vote's going to be, but as I understand it, it's going to be more freedom for the states to have it's actually going to deschedule cannabis if it passes. Am I wrong?
Well, I mean, even as of 2 days ago, I'm still hearing rumbles about iterations to what the final version or not final version could be. I don't have that on good authority. But this, I would like to say on good authority, is it is important that we move the ball forward in terms of impact and access, in terms of touching on the disparities around access to this product from a business, from a social justice, from a criminal justice. It is important even from a banking and all of that, because it's all connected. And I say that to people, regardless of where you fall on the conversation around cannabis, we're all human beings. And anything that impacts us as humans, you might not have a cousin who is going to jail for having a joint, but I do. But at the same time, your uncle might own a dispensary business and he's suffering under the burden of 280E. Our fates are tied. And the sooner we accept that our fates are tied as it relates to cannabis, the sooner we can join hands together, because by solving some of these problems, we solve all of our problems. From social justice, criminal justice, to banking, it's all connected. And that's how I see it.
Well, we definitely need federal regulation, or not, sorry, federal legalization to solve all the injustices that the war on drugs has caused. You're 100% right. It's crazy to me that, I'm going to use Colorado, for example, just because I know the dates, right? If you were selling cannabis in 2008, 2009, you're in jail for a long time. If you were selling it in 2010, you're making money, right? You're legal. It was a medical market then. And I don't think that that's justified. But I went back and I look at the prohibition of alcohol to kind of compare it to what we're dealing with cannabis, right? And I actually went and Googled it right before we had this show, because I'm like, I wonder if when they repealed alcohol, if they let people out of jail. And actually turns out they didn't. That when but it's weird how it lines up, right? And I'm kind of rambling here because I literally just read it, that any of the bootleggers or people caught bootlegging during Prohibition, when they repealed it, they actually continued to serve their sentences. However, when Prohibition was appealed, it was actually a state-by-state decision on how they wanted to repeal it and everything else around it. So each individual state kind of set up the rules around it. Some people granted, pardons and everything else like that. They also said that pardons weren't as likely because jail sentences weren't as lengthy back then. Clearly, things progressed. But I also, if we look at the state of where the world was back then, we've made so many changes for the better that I don't know if we can use prohibition of alcohol as a model, because shit wasn't good back then either. So, I'm 100% behind you guys. Last Prisoner Project, all these. It needs to happen. We need to let people out of jail, non-violent offenders. If you're a cartel member and you're killing people, fuck you, stay in jail. But if you're a non-violent offender, we need to get them out.
Absolutely. If I may just add one point to that, I look at Florida, for example, where people are not allowed to vote if they've gone to jail, right? So think about it. You're a non-violent offender. You go to jail and you come out, and for a cannabis-related non-violent crime, and then you can't vote. It blows my mind. I mean,
Yeah.
so yes, I stand with all of our activists and all people who are putting money and time working with several projects to expunge records, to pay people's fines so that they can live as free citizens, to do all of that kind of stuff, especially the non-violent offenders. Please let them all out. And cannabis related charges, let them all out and give them their lives back. Please. I mean, multi-billion dollar industry. You see my energy, my temperature is
Yeah.
rising. I don't want to boil over. So who's let him out. Thank you.
We don't want to ignite those chemicals behind you.
I know, right? So that we don't, this. But I get very passionate when we talk about those because
No, and it should be, right? If I talk about alcohol again, though, the main difference, right, is alcohol went from illegal to just something that was still used for self-medication, but not in the healthcare form, right? People that just want to forget, they're using it for parties. Not only is cannabis going from illegal to essential, but it's going from something that you don't want to put in your body because it's bad for you to no, this is actually good for you. If it was just still going to be something like alcohol, then maybe I can see the argument. But if you're going to turn it into a medication and you're going to admit it's a medication, then you're going to have all these pioneers that are in jail because they were selling medicine.
I've said it several times. I said if I could redo this whole licensing, my mind, every time I take the opportunity to talk to our legislators, where were our legislators when they were writing into bills that if you have a drug-related offense, you cannot work in the cannabis industry? Who are the people? I mean, let's just be honest. Like I said, I was not one of the people who experimented with cannabis. But what the so-called street connect, who apart from trying to make a living so their families don't die of starvation, they have served as the street corner doctors for a long time. Man, I'm having anxiety, man. What you got for me? Dude, man, my stomach hurts. What you got for me? These are the people that have the street knowledge. But I can't hire them. I mean, you understand? Yeah. That just blows my mind. So please, we got to think deeply and act much more deliberately as we continue to work on this legislation.
Oh, and I can go on and on about the comparisons between alcohol to cannabis and, talking about, I don't know anybody who smoked weed and caused domestic violence versus alcohol, at least in the sheer numbers or anything else like that.
But,
correct. That will be a whole nother podcast for a very, very long time.
Very well.
Let's talk about your company more, because I know we're getting towards the end of the show here. I want to just talk to us about what you guys are doing, what you're excited about. You had mentioned that you're operating in Australia as well as the United States. Or is this more of a global play just to impact medicine everywhere? Because you and your team are working on changing the world right now, and I love that.
Thank you, Todd. At Zelira, we believe really at the heart of it, and all the cannabis companies I've been involved in, we say, our goal and our mission is to improve the lives of the patient we serve. At the end of the day, there's a patient at the center of everything that I do. And as I have the honor of leading Zelira as the Chief Executive Officer for our U.S. operations, and as a corporate strategy, even with our counterparts in Australia, we are focused on designing or formulating medicines that impact both a disease state, provide therapeutic relief, provide the clinical validation to support that packet, and ultimately gives access to the patients that need it. So we are very excited about a bunch of things. This year alone, Zelira has published data on 2 clinical trials with positive results on both. One is our insomnia trial, where we've created the first of its kind double-blinded, placebo-controlled crossover trial for a cannabis drug to treat chronic insomnia. And when we put that clinical packet against the Ambiens and the Belsumaras of the world, which are multi-million-dollar insomnia drugs, we kicked their behind across the board in terms of our data packet. Secondly, we published data on our trials on the dose escalation for pain, and that's exciting. We have some of the trials coming on board, and by the end of next month, Zelira would have launched 5 products into the marketplace. For a company that was launched in January of 2020, it's very exciting time in our company. We have a global footprint in Australia, in the United States, in the UK, in Germany, and in New Zealand as well. So we're excited. We continue to expand the national footprint for our range of products that we've designed with partners in Pennsylvania, in Louisiana, in the United States, with some other partners about to be announced. So we're very excited. We're very busy. We've expanded our development into some other disease indications. So really, we are really focused with our mission of improving the lives of the patients we serve. And it's an honor and a privilege and a joy to be able to do this type of work.
I bet you go to work with a smile on your face every day.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I absolutely do.
That's awesome, man. Dude, I had a blast with this conversation. I can't tell you how much I learned. And, as you guys progress, I'd love to have you back. I'd love for you to keep telling us, giving us updates on everything that you guys are doing, all the progress that you've made. I know you work with Erica Daniels. You guys you formulate the Hope line, if I'm correct.
Yes,
right?
I did. Yes, I did. It's with Erica's group, and just a phenomenal partnership. And again, it really, really just a great team of people. So I stand on the shoulders and I represent some of the best people to work with in the world.
Well, Dr. O, you represent one of my favorite and the best parts of this industry. I hope that members of the general public, if you're not looking at the cannabis space, if you don't understand it, I hope you watch this episode and you took something away from it, whether it's the social injustice, whether it's the medical side, or just the fact that this is a natural remedy. I really hope you guys learned something. I love this. I can have this conversation all day, but I've got other things that need to happen. Dr. O, thank you. Thank you very much for doing this. And before we let you go, website, social media, appearance, anything that you want to promote?
Well, Zelira TX is Zelira's website, ZELIRATX.com. You can find me on social media. I forget what my handle is, but I can email that to you. Zelira is on Facebook. We communicate, and on LinkedIn, we communicate a lot of what we're doing, exciting stuff. So follow us and share with us. We share with you. We're very excited about what we do.
Very cool, man. Well, we for all you guys watching, we'll make it easier for you. We'll drop all the information into the show notes below. Let me see. Also, we're doing this now, so if you can subscribe, hopefully it'll be right here. But subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/elevateyourgrind. If you guys want to see our live episodes, we do those once a week, Tuesdays at 5 o'clock on Facebook, facebook.com/CannabisGroup. And if you want to check out any of our upcoming panels, it is joinclab.com. Register as a member. You're going to get some great content. I have a feeling that Dr. O is going to be on an upcoming panel before the end of the year. But we'll definitely see you again, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm very grateful. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody, again for watching. This has been another episode of Elevate Your Grind, and we are out.